A quiet family afternoon at a club turned into a nightmare when a group of guards humiliated an off-duty police officer in front of his wife and two young daughters. What started as an unfair accusation quickly escalated into a public spectacle, with the officer enduring insults and mistreatment under the watchful eyes of dozens of club patrons. But they had no idea who they were humiliating. Soon, they would face a reckoning they never saw coming. Don't forget to like and comment where you are from. The perfect day that turned sour. The Aqua Oasis Club was a gleaming paradise on the outskirts of the city, a haven for families seeking relief from the relentless summer heat. With its expansive pools, luxurious cabanas, and sprawling green lawns, the club promised an afternoon of joy and relaxation. The hum of children's laughter and the occasional splash of water filled the air, blending seamlessly with the soft rhythm of music playing from the speakers. For Officer Ethan Carter, this was supposed to be a rare day of peace. Ethan had spent the past weeks buried in long shifts, patrolling the streets and dealing with the unpredictable chaos that came with being a police officer in the city. But today was different. Dressed in casual swim trunks and a white polo shirt, he was just a husband and father, here to enjoy some much-needed time with his family. Beside him, his wife, Sophia, radiated calm in a floral sundress, her wide-brimmed sun hat shielding her from the afternoon sun. Their daughters, Lily 9 and Emma 6, were already bubbling with excitement. Emma clutched an inflatable flamingo float, almost as big as she was, while Lily twirled a pair of swim goggles in her hands. "Daddy, come on, the pool's waiting." Lily tugged at Ethan's hand, her bright blue swimsuit shimmering in the sunlight. All right. Let's get some sunscreen on you first," Ethan said with a chuckle, crouching down to her level. "We don't need you turning into a lobster." Sophia smiled from her lounge chair as she unpacked the family's picnic bag. "Girls, listen to your dad. No sunscreen, no pool." Emma pouted dramatically, but the sisters complied, standing still long enough for Ethan to apply the sunscreen. The family dynamic was effortless, the kind of love and warmth that made strangers smile as they passed by. Once ready, Ethan escorted the girls to the shallow pool, while Sophia relaxed with her book under the shade. The girls squealed with delight as they splashed into the cool water, their laughter echoing across the pool deck. Ethan stayed close, his eyes constantly scanning the area. Not out of habit, but instinct. Even on his day off, the protective nature of a police officer never truly left him. Everything seemed perfect. The day was everything the Carters had hoped for, a slice of paradise amidst the chaos of their usual routines. But as Ethan leaned against the pool's edge, watching his daughters play, something caught his attention. Two security guards stood at the far end of the pool deck, their postures stiff and their faces tight with thinly veiled irritation. They whispered to each other, their eyes occasionally darting in Ethan's direction. At first, he thought nothing of it. Security guards often lingered near the busiest areas of the club, but when their gazes became more frequent, their expressions more pointed, Ethan's internal radar kicked in. "Everything okay, honey?" Sophia called from her lounger, noticing his distracted look. Ethan turned to her with a reassuring smile. "Yeah, just keeping an eye on things. You know me." She chuckled softly. "You're off duty, remember? Let someone else worry about the world for a few hours." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't fully shake the feeling of unease. He watched as the two guards whispered again before walking toward him. Their approach was deliberate, their faces expressionless. "Excuse me," one of the guards said, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, his uniform immaculate. The badge on his chest read, "Ramirez." Beside him was a younger guard, wiry and pale, who seemed to be following the lead of his senior. Ethan straightened up, a friendly but cautious smile on his face. "Can I help you?" "We've received a complaint," Ramirez said bluntly, his tone leaving no room for pleasantries. Ethan frowned, glancing briefly at his daughters, who were still laughing and splashing in the pool. "A complaint? About what?" The younger guard shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Ramirez, who continued without missing a beat. "Someone reported suspicious behavior. We're just following up." Ethan's eyebrows furrowed. "Suspicious behavior? I'm here with my family, enjoying the pool like everyone else." Sophia, sensing the tension, had risen from her lounger and was walking over. Her calm expression belied the concern in her eyes. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice steady. Ramirez's eyes flicked briefly to her before returning to Ethan. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. We're speaking to your husband." Sophia's mouth tightened, but she said nothing, standing resolutely by Ethan's side. "Look," Ethan said, his tone calm but firm. "I'm not sure what this is about, but I can assure you, there's nothing suspicious going on here. I'm an off-duty police officer, just spending time with my family." Ramirez's eyes narrowed slightly. "An off-duty cop?" His tone was laced with skepticism. "Do you have any proof of that?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He had encountered skepticism and disrespect in his line of work before, but never like this, not while he was with his wife and children. Slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out his badge, holding it up for the guards to see. "This should clear things up," he said, his voice measured. The younger guard's face turned pale, his discomfort evident. Ramirez, however, showed no sign of backing down. Instead, he smirked, a hint of condescension creeping into his expression. "Nice badge, but anyone could fake that. Do you have any other proof?" Ethan's patience was wearing thin. He took a deep breath, glancing at Sophia, who placed a calming hand on his arm. "Look," Sophia said, her voice steady but firm. "This is ridiculous. We've been here all afternoon. What exactly do you think we've done?" Ramirez crossed his arms, his smirk unwavering. "It's not about what you've done. It's about what you might do. We have to ensure the safety of all our guests." Ethan felt his blood boil. The insinuation was clear, and it took everything in him to keep his composure. "I've worked in law enforcement for over a decade," he said, his voice low but firm. "I know when someone is overstepping their authority. And right now, that's exactly what you're doing." Ramirez's smirk faltered for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "We're just doing our job, sir. If you're not hiding anything, then you shouldn't have a problem." The exchange had drawn the attention of other club-goers, who were now watching with curiosity, and murmurs of confusion. Lily and Emma, sensing the tension, clung to Sophia's side, their wide eyes filled with worry. Ethan's protective instincts flared. He stepped closer to Ramirez, his posture commanding. "You've made your point. Now, unless you have a valid reason to detain me, I suggest you let my family enjoy the rest of our day." Ramirez stared at him for a long moment before finally stepping back, his smirk replaced by a scowl. "We'll be keeping an eye on you," he said before turning and walking away. The younger guard hesitated, his eyes darting between Ethan and Ramirez before following his superior. Ethan exhaled slowly, his fists unclenching as he turned to Sophia and the girls. "Are you okay?" Sophia nodded, though her expression was tight with concern. "What was that about?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. "But I don't think it's over." As the family tried to settle back into their day, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the guards' actions weren't random. Something deeper was at play, and it was only a matter of time before it came to the surface. The aftermath and escalation. Ethan Carter tried to shake off the incident, but the uneasy tension from his confrontation with the guards lingered. Back at the poolside, he watched his daughters attempt to return to their playful splashing, but the spark of their joy had dimmed. Lily kept casting nervous glances at the guards, while Emma stayed glued to Sophia's side, refusing to go back into the water. "Daddy, why were those men so mean to you?" Lily asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the chatter of the club patrons around them. Ethan crouched beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes people don't act the way they should, sweetheart. But everything's okay now, I promise." Sophia sat on the edge of the lounge chair, her brow furrowed. "Ethan, I think we should leave. The girls are shaken, and I don't trust those guards not to come back." Ethan hesitated. Part of him wanted to pack up and go to shield his family from further discomfort, but another part of him, the part forged through years of facing adversity, refused to back down. "If we leave now, we're letting them win," Ethan said, his tone firm. "We have just as much right to be here as anyone else. They're not going to scare us away." Sophia studied his face, her concern mingling with understanding. "All right," she said softly, "but if anything else happens, We're leaving. Agreed? Agreed, Ethan replied, though the fire in his eyes suggested he wasn't ready to let the matter rest. From across the pool deck, Ramirez stood near the guard station, his arms crossed as he watched the Carters. His younger colleague, visibly uncomfortable, fidgeted beside him. Was that really necessary? The younger guard asked, his voice low. Ramirez shot him a sharp look. What's your problem? That guy's nothing special. Just another wannabe tough guy flashing a badge. We put him in his place. But he's with his family, the guard argued. And if he's really a cop, Ramirez cut him off with a dismissive wave. I don't care if he's the mayor. Nobody shows me up like that. We're going to remind him who's in charge here. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan tried to focus on enjoying the time with his family. He encouraged Lily and Emma to join him in the pool, and slowly their laughter returned. Sophia relaxed somewhat, though her watchful eyes never strayed far from the guard station. But the peace didn't last. Just as the family was settling into a semblance of normalcy, a commotion erupted near the pool entrance. A loud, commanding voice echoed across the club, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Sir, I need you to step aside now. Ethan turned to see Ramirez confronting another patron, a middle-aged man in a Hawaiian shirt who appeared utterly baffled by the aggressive tone. The man held a towel and a pair of goggles, looking like he'd just come from the pool. What's this about? The man asked, his voice tinged with irritation. I was just grabbing my stuff from the locker room. Ramirez stepped closer, invading the man's personal space. We received a report about someone matching your description engaging in inappropriate behavior. Care to explain yourself? The man's jaw dropped. Inappropriate behavior? Are you serious? I've been here with my kids all day. The scene drew a crowd, with patrons murmuring and exchanging uneasy glances. Sophia grabbed Ethan's arm. Ethan, don't, she whispered urgently. But Ethan was already on his feet, his expression dark. I can't just stand here and let this happen. He approached the confrontation, his presence commanding attention. Excuse me, he said, his voice calm but firm. What's going on here? Ramirez turned to him, his smirk returning. This doesn't concern you, officer. Ethan crossed his arms. It concerns me if you're harassing another guest without cause. You're making a habit of this, aren't you? The crowd murmured in agreement, emboldened by Ethan's intervention. Ramirez's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. This man was reported for suspicious behavior, Ramirez said, his tone defensive. And what evidence do you have? Ethan countered. Or is this another one of your baseless accusations? The tension between the two men was palpable, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Ramirez took a step closer, his posture rigid. You're out of line, Carter. And you're out of control, Ramirez, Ethan shot back. If you keep this up, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble. For a moment it seemed like Ramirez might lash out, but the murmurs of the crowd seemed to give him pause. He glanced around, realizing that the tide of opinion was turning against him. Fine, Ramirez said through gritted teeth, but this isn't over. He turned and walked away, the younger guard trailing behind him with an apologetic glance at Ethan. The middle-aged man in the Hawaiian shirt exhaled deeply, his relief evident. Thanks, man. I don't know what that was about. Ethan nodded. No problem, just be careful. I don't think he's done causing trouble. As the crowd dispersed, Sophia approached Ethan, her expression a mix of pride and exasperation. You just can't help yourself, can you? Ethan shrugged. Someone had to step in. Sophia sighed, taking his hand. Let's just hope this doesn't escalate further. But deep down they both knew the day's events were far from over. Humiliation in the spotlight. As the afternoon sun beat down on the poolside, Ethan Carter kept a watchful eye on his family. Despite his best efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy, the tension in the air was undeniable. Every time Ramirez and his guards walked by, their pointed stares sent a clear message. This wasn't over. Sophia tried to distract the girls, encouraging them to play games in the shallow end of the pool, but Ethan noticed her occasional glances toward the guards. She was just as uneasy as he was, though she masked it well for the sake of their daughters. Suddenly, a shrill whistle pierced the air. Ramirez stood at the edge of the pool, his expression hard and unyielding. In his hand, he held a clipboard, which he waved for attention. "Everyone out of the water," he barked. "We're conducting a routine inspection, club policy." The announcement was met with confusion and groans from the patrons, who reluctantly began climbing out of the pool. Parents wrapped their children in towels, while others muttered under their breath about the inconvenience. Sophia turned to Ethan, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What is he doing now?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's a power play. He's trying to flex his authority in front of everyone." As the pool cleared, Ramirez's gaze locked onto Ethan's family. "You!" he called out, pointing directly at them. "Step over here." Sophia clutched Lily and Emma protectively, her voice low. "Ethan, do something." Ethan took a deep breath, his years of training kicking in. He approached Ramirez with measured steps, his expression calm but firm. "What's this about?" Ramirez smirked. "Just following up on a concern raised by another guest. It seems someone reported suspicious behavior near the pool area." Ethan's patience was wearing thin. "And what exactly does that have to do with my family?" Ramirez leaned in, his voice low enough for only Ethan to hear. "You think you can show me up in front of everyone and get away with it? Not a chance, officer." Ethan squared his shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "You're crossing a line, Ramirez. Back off." But Ramirez wasn't done. He raised his voice, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. "Sir, I'm going to need to check your belongings. Standard procedure for reported incidents." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sophia stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "How you can't be serious? We've done nothing wrong." Ramirez ignored her, his eyes locked on Ethan. "If you have nothing to hide, you won't mind cooperating." Ethan clenched his fists, fighting to keep his composure. He knew Ramirez was baiting him, trying to provoke a reaction that would justify his behavior. But he also knew that refusing would only escalate the situation further. "Fine," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "Let's get this over with." Ramirez motioned for one of the younger guards to approach. Together they began rifling through the Carter family's belongings, pulling out towels, sunscreen, and water bottles as the crowd looked on in silence. Lily clung to Sophia, her eyes filling with tears. "Mommy, why are they doing this?" Sophia knelt down, her voice trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart. They're just making a mistake." Ethan's stomach churned as the guards continued their sham search. When they finally finished, Ramirez held up an empty cooler bag with exaggerated flourish. "Nothing here," he announced, his tone mocking. "Guess the report was unfounded." Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and controlled. "Are you done now?" Ramirez smirked. "For now, but don't think this is over." The guards walked away, leaving the Carter family standing in the middle of the pool deck, surrounded by onlookers. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire, their curiosity and judgment palpable. Sophia turned to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is too much. We need to leave." But Ethan's resolve only hardened. He looked at his daughters, their innocent faces etched with confusion and fear, and knew he couldn't let Ramirez's actions go unchecked. "We're staying," Ethan said firmly. "They don't get to win." Sophia searched his face, seeing the determination in his eyes. She nodded reluctantly, knowing there was no changing his mind. As they returned to their lounge chairs, Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let this slide, not just for his family's sake, but for everyone who had witnessed the guards' abuse of power. Ramirez might think he had the upper hand, but he was about to learn a hard lesson. Ethan reached for his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen as he debated his next move. If Ramirez wanted a fight, he was ready to give him one. A turning point. Ethan sat by the pool, his mind working overtime. The humiliation his family endured in front of the crowd wasn't just a momentary injustice. It was a challenge to his integrity and the principles he lived by as a police officer. He wouldn't let Ramirez or anyone else abuse their power unchecked. Sophia leaned toward him, her voice laced with concern. "What are you planning, Ethan? Don't make this worse." He met her gaze, his tone steady but resolute. "I'm not going to let this slide. Not for us, not for anyone else they've bullied, but I'll handle this carefully." Sophia nodded reluctantly, her trust in him battling with her fear of escalation. "Just promise me you'll think of the girls." "I always do," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. With his decision made, Ethan rose from his seat and walked toward the club's reception area, where the manager's office was located. He moved with purpose, ignoring the whispers and stares of other patrons. His family watched him go, their hope pinned on his ability to set things right. Inside the manager's office, a man in his late 40s with a receding hairline and a slightly rumpled suit sat behind a desk cluttered with papers. The plaque on the desk read, "Kenneth Ross, Club Manager." Ross looked up as Ethan entered, his expression a mix of surprise and wariness. "Can I help you?" Ethan closed the door behind him, his voice firm but respectful. "We need to talk about your security team." Ross sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, if this is about Ramirez—" "It is," Ethan interrupted. "His behavior is unacceptable. He humiliated my family in front of everyone and used an unfounded accusation as an excuse to harass us." Ross rubbed his temples, clearly exhausted by the subject. "Ramirez is difficult, I'll admit, but he runs a tight ship. Some patrons actually like his no-nonsense approach." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Harassment and intimidation aren't no-nonsense. Sass, they're abuse of power, and I don't think you want that reputation attached to your club." Ross hesitated, clearly weighing his options. "What are you suggesting?" Ethan took a deep breath. "For starters, an apology, public and immediate. My family deserves that much. Afterward, I suggest you reevaluate Ramirez's role here. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on everyone, including you." Ross shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "An apology might calm things down, but Ramirez won't take kindly to being reprimanded." "That's not my problem," Ethan said sharply. "Your guards answer to you, don't they?" Ross nodded reluctantly. "Fine, I'll speak to him. But if this escalates—" "It won't escalate on my end," Ethan assured him. "I just want this resolved." Outside, Ramirez watched Ethan exit the manager's office with narrowed eyes. He'd been expecting retaliation, but seeing Ethan walk away without confrontation made his blood boil. "What did he say to Ross?" Ramirez muttered to one of his guards. The younger guard shrugged. "No idea, but he didn't look happy when Carter went in." Ramirez's jaw clenched. "If Ross tries to pull rank on me, it'll only backfire." His ego bruised, Ramirez decided he wasn't going to wait for whatever came next. He needed to reassert control before it slipped entirely out of his grasp. Ethan returned to his family, a subtle but noticeable change in his demeanor. He sat down, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. "What happened?" Sophia asked, leaning in closer. "I spoke to the manager," Ethan replied. "He agreed to address the situation with Ramirez." Sophia frowned. "Do you think it'll work?" "We'll find out soon enough," Ethan said, glancing toward the reception area. Minutes later, Ross emerged, his expression strained as he walked toward Ramirez and the other guards. A heated but muffled conversation ensued, with Ramirez gesturing angrily and Ross maintaining a calm but firm tone. The exchange ended with Ramirez storming off toward the guard station, his face red with frustration. Ross approached Ethan, his discomfort evident. "I've spoken to Ramirez," Ross said, keeping his voice low. "He's agreed to leave your family alone for the rest of the day. I'll monitor the situation closely." "Thank you," Ethan said, though he could see the strain in the manager's demeanor. Ross hesitated before adding, "If you have any further issues, come straight to me." "Will do," Ethan replied. The family tried to relax and salvage what remained of the afternoon, but the tension was hard to shake. Ramirez's presence still loomed large, and Ethan knew the man wouldn't let this go so easily. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pool deck, Ethan noticed Ramirez and a few guards huddled together near the back entrance. Their expressions were intense, and their occasional glances toward Ethan's family didn't go unnoticed. "They're planning something," Ethan thought, his instincts kicking in. He didn't know what Ramirez's next move would be, but he was determined to stay one step ahead. The escalation. Ethan's instincts, as a seasoned officer, told him that Ramirez wasn't the type to let things slide. The guards' huddled conversation, the occasional glares in his direction, and the tension that hung in the air all pointed to trouble brewing. He decided it was time to be proactive. Leaning closer to Sophia, he whispered, "Stay here with the girls. Keep a low profile. I'm going to take a look around. Sophia grabbed his arm, her voice laced with worry. Ethan, please don't make things worse. I won't, he assured her, but I need to know what we're dealing with. Ethan moved through the club with a casual stride, his sharp eyes scanning for signs of trouble. He passed the snack bar, the kiddie pool, and the volleyball court, all bustling with activity. Yet his focus was on the edges of the property, the places most people wouldn't bother to look. It didn't take long for him to spot Ramirez and two other guards near a service gate leading to the parking lot. They were speaking in hushed tones, but the hostility was evident in their body language. Ethan positioned himself behind a nearby hedge, close enough to catch snippets of their conversation. This guy thinks he can come here and throw his weight around, Ramirez growled. Embarrass me in front of my team. I don't care if he's a cop. He's just another guy with a big ego. One of the guards, younger and visibly nervous, hesitated. Boss, maybe we should let it go. The manager already told us to back off. Ramirez shot him a glare that could cut steel. The manager doesn't run this place, I do, and no one humiliates me without consequences. The third guard, older and more loyal to Ramirez, nodded in agreement. What's the plan? Ramirez smirked, his tone dripping with malice. We'll wait until he's alone, away from his wife and kids. Then we'll see how tough he really is. Ethan's blood boiled as he listened. He knew he had to act, but a direct confrontation now would only escalate the situation further. He needed a plan and witnesses. Ethan returned to Sophia, masking his frustration with a calm demeanor. I need you to trust me, he said quietly. Things might get tense, but I'll make sure we're safe. What's going on? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Ramirez isn't letting this go, Ethan admitted, but I'll handle it. Before she could protest, Ethan stood and approached a lifeguard on duty near the pool. The young woman, barely out of her teens, looked up at him with curiosity. Excuse me, Ethan began, flashing a disarming smile. Can you point me to the nearest security camera? I'd like to speak to whoever's monitoring them. The lifeguard hesitated, glancing toward a small building near the parking lot. That's the security office. Why, is everything okay? Just a minor issue, Ethan said, keeping his tone light. Thanks for your help. The security office was cramped, with monitors displaying live feeds from cameras positioned throughout the club. A lone technician sat at the desk, scrolling through footage on a computer. Ethan knocked lightly on the doorframe. Hey, got a minute? The technician looked up, startled. Sure. What's up? I'm Officer Ethan Carter, LAPD, Ethan said, keeping his voice firm but friendly. I'm here with my family, and there's been a situation involving some of your guards. I need to make sure my family's safe. The technician's eyes widened. You're a cop? Ethan nodded. Off duty, but yes. Can you help me keep an eye on Ramirez and his team? They're acting suspicious, and I'd rather avoid a bigger problem. The technician hesitated before nodding. Yeah, okay. Let me see what I can do. Ethan stood behind the technician as they pulled up live feeds from the cameras near the service gate. Sure enough, Ramirez and his men were still there, their expressions tense and conspiratorial. Can you save this footage? Ethan asked. Just in case. Already done, the technician replied, hitting a few keys. Ethan clapped the technician on the shoulder. You might have just prevented something bad from happening. Thank you. Back at the pool, Ramirez's patience was wearing thin. He paced near the edge of the property, his frustration evident in every movement. Where is he? Ramirez muttered. He can't stay glued to his family all day. The loyal guard, clearly eager to please, pointed toward the main pool area. There he is near the snack bar. Ramirez followed the direction of the guard's finger, spotting Ethan sitting with Sophia and their daughters. He smirked. Let's make this quick. But as Ramirez and his men moved toward Ethan, the manager, Kenneth Ross, intercepted them. His face was flushed with anger, and his voice carried across the pool deck. Ramirez, a word. Now. Ramirez stiffened, his expression darkening. What's the problem? The problem, Ross said, his voice low and furious, is that you don't seem to understand boundaries. I've had enough complaints about you today to last a year. You're done. Turn in your badge and leave the premises. Ramirez's jaw dropped. You're firing me over this guy? Over your behavior, Ross corrected. Leave or I'll call the police myself. From his seat, Ethan watched the confrontation unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. Ramirez's dismissal was a victory, but Ethan knew it wouldn't end there. Ramirez wasn't the type to walk away quietly. As Ramirez stormed off, Ethan leaned towards Sophia. "Stay close. Things might get worse before they get better." Sophia nodded, her trust in him unwavering despite her fear. Ethan's eyes scanned the crowd, his senses heightened. He wasn't just protecting his family anymore. He was preparing for the moment Ramirez would strike back. The setup. Ethan had learned through years on the force that victory often felt temporary. Ramirez's stormy departure might have brought relief to the club, but Ethan could see the writing on the wall. This wasn't over. He had taken precautions, gathered evidence, and looped in key witnesses, but the gut feeling that Ramirez wasn't done with him gnawed at him like a persistent itch. As he sat with his family, sipping water from a plastic cup and trying to appear relaxed, his eyes never stopped scanning the club. The patrons were returning to their usual routines, splashing in the pool, lounging in the sun, and chatting among themselves, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the background. Across town, Ramirez paced inside his tiny apartment, the room almost vibrating with his frustration. The loyal guard, Victor, sat on the couch, looking uncomfortable as Ramirez ranted. "They humiliated me," Ramirez shouted, slamming a fist onto the table. "The manager siding with that cop over me? After everything I've done for this place? No, this isn't how it ends." Victor hesitated. "Boss, maybe it's time to let it go. He's not just some random guy, he's a cop. If you push this any further, it could backfire." Ramirez glared at him. "Backfire? Do you know what'll backfire? Letting this go and letting everyone think I'm weak. They need to know you don't mess with me." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "What's the plan?" Ramirez's lips twisted into a sinister grin. "We're going to hit him where it hurts. His pride, his family." Victor's face fell. "Are you sure about this?" "I don't need your approval," Ramirez snapped. Either with me or against me." After a long pause, Victor nodded reluctantly. Back at the club, Ethan decided it was time to move his family to a safer spot. He convinced Sophia and the girls to join him near a quieter corner of the pool area where they could relax without drawing too much attention. "Why don't we just leave?" Sophia asked softly, her voice betraying her nerves. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on hers. "If we leave now, it'll look like they've won. Besides, I've taken steps to ensure our safety. If they try anything, we'll be ready." His daughters, oblivious to the tension, played nearby, their laughter providing a brief respite from the unease. As Ethan watched them, a club employee approached cautiously. It was the lifeguard who had directed him to the security office earlier. "Excuse me, sir," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "I thought you should know. Ramirez was seen talking to some people in the parking lot before he left. He looked angry." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Thanks for letting me know. Did you see who he was with?" The lifeguard shook her head. "No, but it didn't look good." Ethan nodded. "You've done the right thing. If you see anything else, let me know immediately." The lifeguard left and Ethan turned back to Sophia. "It's Ramirez. He's planning something. We need to stay alert." As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the club, Ethan felt the shift in the atmosphere. The bustling energy of the afternoon had settled into a calmer rhythm, but the unease in his gut only grew stronger. He spotted Victor lingering near the main entrance, his eyes scanning the area with obvious purpose. Ethan decided it was time to act. Leaving Sophia with the girls, he approached Victor, his posture casual but his eyes sharp. "Victor, isn't it?" The younger man jumped slightly, clearly not expecting Ethan to approach him so directly. Yeah. What do you want?" "I think you know," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "Whatever Ramirez is planning, it's not going to end well for him. Or you." Victor's eyes darted nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You seem like a decent guy. Don't let Ramirez drag you down with him. You still have a chance to walk away from this." For a moment, Victor's expression softened, as though he was considering Ethan's words. But then he shook his head, his loyalty to Ramirez overriding his better judgment. "I can't. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. Ethan sighed. Then you'd better hope he knows what he's doing. As dusk approached, Ramirez finally made his move. He arrived at the club's parking lot with two unfamiliar men, both burly and dressed in plain clothes. They carried themselves with the confidence of enforcers, their intent clear in their expressions. Ramirez led them toward the club's entrance, stopping just outside the gates. "We're not here to make a scene," he said, though his tone betrayed his true intentions. "We're here to send a message." Inside, Ethan was already on high alert. The moment he saw Ramirez approaching with reinforcements, he stepped into action. He intercepted them near the main entrance, his stance firm and unyielding. "That's far enough," Ethan said, his voice carrying an authority that froze Ramirez in his tracks. The two men flanking Ramirez exchanged uncertain glances, clearly not expecting such confidence from their target. "You're making this worse for yourself," Ethan continued. "Turn around and leave, or I'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." Ramirez smirked, his bravado masking his frustration. "You think you're the only one with connections, officer? You're out of your jurisdiction here." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The law doesn't stop at jurisdiction, and neither does justice. Ramirez's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "We'll see about that." Before Ethan could respond, one of Ramirez's enforcers lunged at him, his movements quick but clumsy. Ethan sidestepped easily, using the man's momentum to throw him off balance. The second enforcer tried to grab Ethan from behind, but a swift elbow to the ribs sent him staggering backward. The scuffle drew the attention of nearby club patrons, who began gathering at a safe distance to watch the unfolding drama. "Stop this!" Ethan shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're only digging yourselves deeper." But Ramirez wasn't listening. Fueled by his bruised ego and thirst for revenge, he charged at Ethan, his fists swinging wildly. Ethan ducked the first punch and countered with a controlled strike to Ramirez's shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. The crowd erupted in murmurs and gasps as Ramirez scrambled to his feet, his confidence shattered. "Enough!" Ethan barked, his voice echoing across the club. "This ends now. The aftermath begins." The echoes of Ethan's commanding voice silenced the commotion as Ramirez staggered to his feet, his expression a mixture of fury and humiliation. The crowd around the pool area had grown, their murmurs swelling as more patrons gathered to witness the fallout. Ethan's family, watching from a safe distance, stood frozen. Sophia held their daughters close, her face a mix of fear and pride. Camille, their eldest, whispered, "Is Dad okay?" Sophia nodded, though her eyes stayed glued to the scene. "Your dad knows what he's doing. Stay here." Ethan turned his focus to Ramirez and his two enforcers, who now stood hesitantly by his side, their confidence thoroughly shaken. "Ramirez," Ethan said firmly, "this is your last chance. Leave now before things get worse." But Ramirez's pride wouldn't let him back down. "You think you've won?" he spat, brushing dust off his clothes. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Ethan folded his arms, his composure unyielding. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who can't handle accountability and hides behind threats." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a few even clapping softly at Ethan's remark. Ramirez's face reddened. Despite the growing attention, Ramirez wasn't ready to walk away. He motioned for one of his enforcers to step forward. The man hesitated but complied, his body language tense. Ethan noticed the bulge under the enforcer's jacket, a concealed weapon. His instincts kicked in, his hand subtly resting near his waistband where his off-duty firearm was holstered. "Don't do this," Ethan warned, his voice calm but with a sharp edge. "Think about where this will lead." The enforcer stopped, glancing nervously at Ramirez, who gave a curt nod. But before the man could act, the sound of approaching sirens pierced the air. Ramirez's face twisted in frustration. He turned to see two police cars pulling into the parking lot, their lights flashing. Officers emerged, their hands on their holsters as they assessed the scene. "Drop whatever you're holding," one officer commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. The enforcer immediately raised his hands, backing away from Ethan. Ramirez cursed under his breath, his plan unraveling before his eyes. The lead officer approached Ethan, his eyes narrowing as he recognized him. "Detective Blake." Ethan nodded. "Good to see you, Sergeant Harris." Harris surveyed the scene, his gaze settling on Ramirez and his enforcers. "What's going on here?" Ethan gestured toward Ramirez. "These men followed me and my family here after an earlier altercation. They've been harassing us ever since," Ramirez quickly interjected, his voice laced with desperation. "He's lying. He attacked us." But Harris wasn't buying it. He turned to the growing crowd of witnesses. "Is that true?" Several patrons shook their heads. One woman stepped forward, her voice steady. "That man," she said, pointing to Ramirez, "has been causing trouble all day. He was the one who started the fight." Another witness chimed in. "Detective Blake was only defending himself. We saw everything." The officers exchanged glances before Harris stepped closer to Ramirez. "Do you have any idea how serious this is? Assaulting an off-duty officer, threatening his family. Do you know what kind of charges you're looking at?" Ramirez opened his mouth to protest, but was cut off by Harris. "Save it. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." As Ramirez was cuffed and led toward the squad car, his enforcers followed suit, offering no resistance. The crowd parted to let the officers pass, many of them muttering in relief and approval. Ethan finally allowed himself to relax, his shoulders dropping as the tension faded. He turned to Sophia and the girls, who rushed to his side. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. "I'm fine," Ethan reassured her, pulling her and the girls into a tight hug. "It's over." Harris approached, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry you had to deal with this, Ethan. We'll make sure Ramirez faces the consequences." "I appreciate it," Ethan said, "and thanks for getting here when you did." The sergeant nodded. "Just doing our job." News of the incident spread quickly, with several witnesses sharing videos and photos on social media. Within hours, local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as an example of bravery and justice. Ramirez's record came under scrutiny, exposing a history of complaints and misconduct that had been swept under the rug. The club's management, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, issued a public apology to Ethan and his family, announcing that Ramirez was permanently banned from the premises. Ethan, however, declined interviews and chose to focus on his family. "This isn't about me," he told Sophia one evening as they sat on their porch. "It's about making sure people like Ramirez don't get away with this." The experience left a lasting impact on Ethan and his family. While the ordeal had been harrowing, it also reminded them of the importance of standing up for what's right. A week later, Ethan received a handwritten note from a young patron who had witnessed the confrontation. It read, "Dear Detective Blake, thank you for standing up to those men. You showed me what courage looks like and I'll never forget it. Sincerely, Alex, age 12. Ethan smiled as he read the note, his resolve stronger than ever. Closure and resilience. The days following the incident at the club were a whirlwind for Ethan and his family. While the confrontation had shaken them, it also brought a newfound sense of purpose and clarity. The events had not only highlighted Ethan's unwavering commitment to protecting his family, but also exposed the systemic flaws that allowed individuals like Ramirez to abuse their positions unchecked. As news of the ordeal spread, Ethan received an outpouring of support from his community. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers reached out to commend his composure and bravery. The local police department issued a statement praising Ethan's restraint and professionalism during a volatile situation, while also acknowledging the need for continued reform to prevent similar abuses of power. Sophia, ever the pillar of strength, organized a small gathering at their home to thank those who had supported them. "This isn't just about us," she said to the assembled group of neighbors and friends. "It's about standing up for what's right, no matter how difficult it may seem." Camille, their eldest daughter, quietly observed the adults as they spoke about courage and integrity. Later that evening, she approached Ethan with a question that caught him off guard. "Dad," she began, her voice thoughtful, "how do you stay so calm when people are being unfair?" Ethan knelt to her level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's not always easy, sweetheart," he admitted. "But when you know who you are and what you stand for, Their words and actions can't shake you. You just focus on doing the right thing. Meanwhile, Ramirez's life began to unravel. With multiple eyewitness accounts, security footage from the club, and Ethan's detailed report, the case against him was airtight. He was charged with assault, harassment, and abuse of power. The fallout extended beyond the courtroom as the club he worked for came under scrutiny for lax hiring practices and poor oversight of their security staff. The public backlash was swift and unforgiving. Ramirez, once a figure of intimidation, found himself ostracized and disgraced. In a rare moment of accountability, he issued a public apology, though many doubted its sincerity. "I regret my actions that day," he stated during a press conference. "I let my pride and anger get the best of me." But for Ethan, the apology rang hollow. "True accountability isn't about words," he told a local reporter. "It's about actions and the willingness to change." Ethan and his family decided to take the lessons from their ordeal and turn them into something positive. They began volunteering with local organizations that focused on conflict resolution, bullying prevention, and community building. Sophia spearheaded a campaign to promote emotional intelligence in schools, while Ethan hosted workshops for young people on standing up to injustice with courage and dignity. The experience also strengthened their family bond. Sunday afternoons at the club were replaced with family hikes and picnics, where laughter and storytelling became the centerpiece of their time together. Camille and her younger sister Lily often asked Ethan to recount the day's events, not for the drama, but for the lessons it held. One evening, as the sun set over their backyard, Ethan and Sophia sat together, watching their daughters chase fireflies. "Do you think they'll remember this?" Sophia asked softly. Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "Not just the incident. They'll remember that we didn't let fear or anger define us. They'll remember that when faced with adversity, we chose integrity over revenge, strength over weakness." Sophia smiled, her hand finding his. "That's the kind of legacy I want for them." To those who stayed with us until the end of this powerful story, thank you. Stories like these remind us of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Ethan's journey shows us that courage and integrity can triumph over intimidation and injustice, but it's up to each of us to bring these values into our own lives. What would you have done in Ethan's shoes? Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for yourself or your loved ones was the only option? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of the strength they carry within. Together, we can create a community that values resilience, justice, and the power of doing the right thing. Disclaimer: the content is fictitious and does not reflect reality or encourage negative behaviors.